2020 Sonic the Hedgehog movie turns 4 years old, on this SEGA Talk, we rewind to 1994 to when a production company called Trilogy Entertainment Group attempted their own live-action Sonic film. Join us as we review both pitches, including one that was just revealed to the public with help from yours truly. Lights, camera, action, it's time for SEGA Talk. SEGA Bits presents SEGA Talk, a podcast talking all things SEGA! With your hosts, George and Barry.
Look, it's a giant talking egg. I'm not talking to you. I'm talking to the master here. So what?
Hello and welcome to episode 135 of SEGA Talk. I'm Barry. With me is Talkin' George.
Hello, everyone.
Look at him. He's
right.
talking. And this episode, so last time I said we were going to be talking about SEGA World, which is a theme park.
Right.
But in between then and now, something started cooking. I mean, something's been cooking for a while, but the pot simmered over, and I and David from Sonic Retro, Cybershell, and Will from the Game Show Game revealed something that people I don't know have been like DMing me saying, "Where's the PDF? Where's the PDF?"
Wow, that sounds aggressive.
It is aggressive. It's like you just found out about this a week ago, and now you're like dying for like, I don't know. We'll get into it, but before we do that, George, why don't you tell the people who want to know where the PDF is, where they can find our Patreon?
So if you are a Sonic the Movie fan, especially canceled Sonic movie treatments, check us out on patreon.com/SegaBits, and you could fund this podcast where we talk about stuff that never came out, stuff that has come out, and stuff that we love to talk about. So
stuff that we want to come out.
Right.
Yeah.
Wait. Yeah. All right, so
Yeah.
check us out.
Sega wish list. That'd be a good one, like an episode where we talk about what we want, not what there was, but what we want there to be. Yeah. So this episode we're talking about Sonic the Movie, which was later retitled Sonic Wonders of the World, and this was a planned film adaptation of the Sonic the Hedgehog video games. The treatments were developed by a group called Trilogy Entertainment in association with MGM Studios. And you know MGM, right, George?
They're the Lion.
They're with the Lion for a while. They did the James Bond movies.
Yeah.
I don't know. I think Amazon has since bought them. But they also did the Tom and Jerry shorts.
They're the ones that canceled that one movie or whatever. Is that a different studio? Are we talking about there's like a canceled animated movie, not that like recently?
Oh, I don't think that got canceled, but it was like a live action Tom and Jerry movie. Yeah,
okay.
which kind of fits in with like the weird live action hybrid Sonic movie that we're going to be talking about. But the Sonic movie was meant to be live action. They were going to be using practical and special effects to bring Sonic the Hedgehog to life. And work began on this project in 1994. It continued into 1995, but the project was canceled. The two known treatments, which are vastly different, are Sonic the Movie from November 11th, 1994, and Sonic Wonders of the World from May 18th, 1995. And I have to imagine, this is just me guessing, that there are no other treatments because Hollywood is known for kind of shutting down from December through January because it's the holidays, it's award season. Like they're not really working at that time. Movies aren't being produced. There's work being done, but nothing to the extent of like, you know, any other time of the year. So I have to imagine that if this first treatment was November 11th, 94, and then they send it over to SEGA for notes. Probably a month passes, holidays, shutdown of Hollywood, all that. January, February comes around, they get the notes, and then it rolls into May, and they have Wonders of the World. I think that's it. I don't think there's going to be another second, like, middle treatment discovered. But so this might be it. I think we have almost all the materials that we know of out there. But George, were you ever aware of a Sonic movie being planned in the 90s?
No, of course not. I mean, I think the closest that you get to this kind of stuff was when Wizards Coast to Coast would do their, like, rumor mill or whatever on, like, superhero or video game movies that were talked about. But, like,
yeah,
I never took that stuff seriously because you would see some of the most, like, awesome fan casts there where it would be, like, just people that look exactly like the comic book or whatever adaptation. So it would be weird to believe that stuff. So, yeah, I probably wouldn't believe it either. And video game adaptations at the time were really, really bad, so not a really good sign. Like, did you ever see one in the 90s that was memorable and that was good? I mean, there was Street Fighter, there was Double Dragon.
I mean, I think any of the fighting games, like Mortal Kombat, Street Fighter, those were the ones that were really memorable. Super Mario Brothers in 1993, of course, was like a bomb, but it was also a huge deal with kids. So, as far as like me being aware of a Sonic movie being planned, I don't think I was. I think if anything, a lot of my Sonic info came from the letters section of Archie Comics, which is a nice little tie-in for me to plug the most recent Swing and Report show where I actually had David the Lurker on from Sonic Retro, and we revealed some Ken Pender's newsletters. And in those newsletters, Ken would talk about like stuff that Sega had planned. He'd be like, hey, Sonic Extreme's coming out, Sonic Schoolhouse. The movies were never mentioned, but I remember in the letters, kids would be like, I want a Sonic movie. And then I think after 93, kids were really like, well, Mario got a movie, Sonic should get a movie. And they would even kind of play with that. There was a little like one-page comic where Sonic was like, I don't know, he was like giving like fake news or something, and he's like, they're making a Sonic movie, and Sonic's going to be played by Michael J. Fox. And then Tails was like, I'm the Fox. I think we might have shown that frame on our Sonic movie episode, the 2020 movie. But right. Yeah, I just think, I don't think there was anything publicly said about this to fans. I think it was all, I think a lot of this stuff just kind of came out years later. So, do you remember hearing about Wonders of the World or anything over the past few years? Because all of this stuff is recent in terms of like public awareness.
Right. You telling me about the whole script. I remember that because you were pretty upset over some. I mean, I'm not going to say anything, but you were you really wanted to see what was in the script. Let's just say that. I think a lot of Sonic fans do, and it's kind of frustrating. And I could also see it as a collector's point of view, where I have something and I'm like, I got this, so I don't know. I want something for it, and something's always worth something, in my opinion.
Yeah,
to have it public though.
That's a good lead-in because, like I was saying, like you were saying, like I did bring this up some time ago. So the story goes that all this transpired 1994, 1995. It was obviously very well known from the higher-ups at SEGA. Of course, it was very well known from the people who worked on it, which is a handful of individuals. And I don't think much was said about it for many years. Then the Console Wars book came out, and a lot of interviews were being done with Tom Kalinske and Al Nilsson and other people of that era. And I think little bits of this started to get mentioned. Like, oh yeah, we were planning a Sonic movie. It was going to be like A Boy Turns into Sonic or live action or something like that. And I know that Blake J. Harris, who wrote the Console Wars book, who we've interviewed on this show years ago, he knew a lot about this, but he didn't include it in the book. I don't know why he didn't. But I do know that Blake wrote a article for IGN, and he was kind of like telling me, and this was around 2015, late 2015, like, you know, keep your eyes peeled to IGN. There's going to be an article. It's going to be some cool stuff. Never happened. So fast forward to February 2016, and I get an email from, and I think I can mention him. It's Tim Lapatino, and Tim is he is in charge of like a museum of video game art. He has done the Art of Atari book, and just this week he's been announced as the creative director at Atari. So he's now overseeing the Atari brand. And he emailed me and said, hey, this guy has these things and he doesn't know what they are. Can you help him? And the things there was a film canister with like Sonic on it. I don't have a picture of that, unfortunately. I saved it somewhere. And so I was like, I don't know, maybe that was like a gift or something. Like maybe there was candy inside of it. And he goes, but I did say to him, you know, maybe that was related to this Sonic movie that Blake J. Harris told me about. And this guy said, oh, you like Sonic movies? Check this out. And I don't know if you have the pictures up, George, but there's two terrible pictures of Sonic the movie treatment. And it's like intentionally taking the worst pictures possible. I don't know why he did this.
I think this is normal for people online, because I like every time I shop online for something used, like a record or something, it's like, how can you be this bad? But I don't know. I just don't think they think about it like we do.
So Tim introduced me to Tyler, and Tyler, I presume, is someone who we're going to be mentioning fairly soon in this story. But I was shown these pictures, and I was getting really excited. And I was messaging Sonic Retro, and I was like, guys, I found the Sonic movie treatment. Because remember, at the time, we didn't have anything. This is before Wonders of the World, which we'll get to in a little bit, too. But I just calmly said to Tim that, you know, Blake J. Harris mentioned this. I said, hard to say what it's worth, though I'd say maybe $150. Like I was really lowballing.
Of course.
But I didn't know how many pages it was. At this time, like it could have been 3 or 4, because treatments are short typically.
Right.
So he said, oh, interesting. I got back to him with more information. And then I was like, you know, like, I said, like, Sega Bits and Sonic Retro, we'd be willing to, like, collaborate on, like, buying this from him or scanning it or something. Like, if he wants us to pay him for a scan, like, he can keep the script and we'll give him $100 just to scan it. Like, we'd be happy to do something like that. Back and forth. And he basically said, the guy's not interested in selling it just yet. He's not interested in scanning it. And then it kind of just evaporated from there. And I was upset, understandably so, because this stuff is very important. And imagine if this guy had it and then he lost it in a flood, or he lost it in a fire, or he died. And like whoever inherited his shit was like, what is this thing? And threw it away. Like, a lot can happen. And
right.
I'm someone who owns a few, like notable Sonic things. Like I have one hanging here, but that's scanned. You can find pictures of this in high res online. It's Robotnik concept art from SatAM. And like anything I own, you can find scans online of. It doesn't take away the value to me. Like that's an original piece of art, just like how this treatment's the original treatment. And now with the Sonic movies actually being real, like coming out to theaters and Sonic 3's coming out, the value of that is only going up, because that is the first known anything that's an official Sonic movie attempt.
Well, we got to be honest though, like the info in the script is really nobody knows about the info in the script. That's why it makes it, I think, a little more valuable. So I see it in his point of view, because once you scan it, nobody's going to care about the actual script because they know all the info already. So the first person to sell gets to dictate the price. That's what I think.
Right. Yeah.
Right.
So, I mean, I can see where you're coming from with that. I think in that case, if I were the one to own this, I would approach journalism sites, like gaming journalism sites, and say, "Hey, look, I got this thing. I think there's some value to it. You can get a really great article out of it. Compensate me, and I'll send you a scan. But don't share the scans or something like that. Like I might do something like that." Anyway, fast forward. So, January 2023, this treatment appears on eBay, and I think I don't remember this. Like maybe I saw it, but I don't think I did. Because if I did, I'd be like, oh my God, that's it. But it just kind of went up on eBay, and then it went away. It was sold to someone, and we have that eBay picture there. What do you think of that price, George?
$2,000. Okay, so I wouldn't buy it because I would be afraid that I would lose $2,000, and it'd just be someone that wrote a fan fiction script. Like, how do you identify it's a real script from a real studio? That would be my issue.
Right.
Like, how did this come about? Where do you get it? I've never heard of this movie, et cetera, et cetera.
Yeah. Yeah, that's interesting because when going back to this this Tyler individual, they said, and I'm trying to see, I don't see anywhere on here. Yeah, they found SEGA. He's selling some SEGA merch on eBay. It doesn't say like what his connections are. He just like came across a lot of this stuff, and I don't know if he bought like a bulk from someone or if he was a former SEGA employee. And we know them well, where they quit the play. They quit.
Right.
They take a bunch of shit with them, and they actually don't know what they're taking. Like
some
look,
do.
Some do. Some don't. I mean, there's some SEGA employees there right now who don't know half about don't know what they don't even know about the games they're working on, unfortunately. Right. But in any case, this one up on eBay sold, and then how did I learn about it? I think I got to talking to someone. You know what it was? Remember when that Knuckles treatment, or that Knuckles, the very first document about Knuckles, where it was describing him, but it was before he had a name.
Yeah.
It was his design, and I found that on a private Sonic collectors group, and then in the comments, Will, who ended up buying this treatment, he said, "Oh man, I have that. Like, I have a copy of that as well." And I think he was kind of implying that he was sitting on it to, like, use it for something, like maybe his stream or something, and it just kind of got out there through another person. And he was like, "Well, I got a Sonic movie treatment." And I saw that, and I was like, "Oh, well, that's interesting. Tell me more." And so we started talking. He sent me some photos, and it turned out to be the same treatment as this one. And so I was getting really, like, this is it. You know,
Mr. Burns. So very excited.
Well, I was thinking about this earlier today, and I'm like, who am I in this story? And I don't want to, like, toot my own horn, but I'm kind of like the Indiana Jones. Because Indiana Jones never really acquires the artifact. It's always out there. He's always looking for it, but other people get it. It disappears, and in the end, he doesn't have it. And I don't think I ever wanted this treatment. Right. I just wanted it to be out there. And so the fact that I'm one of the individuals who made it happen, who got it out there, I think is a big deal. Not as big as the person who acquired it, scanned it, and allowed it to be out there. Wow. But at the very least, like, it belongs in a museum, and it's in a museum now in the form of Sonic and Sega Retro Wiki. It's preserved. There's no, it's there. You can see it. You can in any case, I'm getting ahead of myself.
You're like a Hawkeye in like the Avengers. You're not the top guy, but you're Hawkeye. So
I'm Hawkeye.
You helped.
I helped. But what Will wanted to do was he wanted to do something fun and special for the release of this. He didn't just want to dump the PDF out there, and I appreciate that. And I think the showman and me also wanted to do something, and so we got to talking, and it kind of ended up being, let's have some prominent Sonic YouTubers come on, and we'll all read through it. And we were thinking maybe Tails Channel, Sega Bits, yada yada yada. But then he really
Sega
was like,
what?
I like Cyber Shell, and I was like,
he's sick.
I like Cyber Shell too. I don't think we can get him because none of us know him.
Right.
As time went on, though, David met Cyber Shell through his Sonic podcast, and so he's like, "Hey,
What's his Sonic
I told
podcast
Cyber
name?
Shell." What's that?
What's the podcast name?
I think it's called Weekly Sonic Podcast. Let me see.
Just in case for our
Sonic
viewers.
It's called Sonic Weekly.
Okay.
Yeah.
Weekly.
They want me to be on it, but I keep being unable to go on it. But yeah, it's a great podcast. They have he had Keith Stack and Cyber Shell on at the same time. That's cool. But yeah, so it was like, okay, and so David asked Cyber Shell if he's down for it. He said he's in, and we were thinking maybe in a month or two we do it, and then it fast forward it sped up to the point where it was like, next week we're doing it next week, and I was like, this is perfect because the Sonic 2020 movie is turning 4 years old Valentine's Day week, and we're going to be doing this treatment reveal that week. So it's perfect. It's 30 years, the 30-year anniversary this year for this treatment. So it's out there now. We're talking about it. I'm presuming other people will too. There's a lot of Sonic tubers out there who have made videos, and I feel so bad for them because they're like, hey, everybody, we're going to be talking about the history of the Sonic movie script. So it started with Wonders of the World, and they like completely missed the 1994 stuff because they didn't know. I knew. Right. They didn't know.
I was going to say, you guys did a read of the script, right?
That's right. So we did a read-through.
Okay. Yeah. So how do you feel trying to be an actor? Is it easy reading from a script in around like a table?
You know, it's interesting because treatments are kind of like scripts, but they jump in and out of, like longer treatments will give you dialogue, but then and locations, but then they'll jump into descriptions of like scenes, and they won't really get specific. So the treatment itself was about 32 pages, so that's about an hour's worth of reading, and in filmmaking, 1 page is usually a minute of screen time. So if this thing would have been a script, it would have been triple the size, like a 90-minute movie.
Right.
But didn't happen. But we're gonna now go back in time even further.
Whoa.
To 1993.
Whew. Good year.
So, SEGA of America's entertainment and consumer products director, and this isn't a Japanese name, but I'm still going to butcher it.
Of course. Right.
Micheline Christini Risley.
Oh, God.
What do you think that is?
I think that's a very difficult name to say. Sounds like an Italian name. Like you name like a car or some sort of fashion brand. Is that what it is?
Something like that. Well, I'll just call her Miss Risley. She initiated plans for a Sonic the Hedgehog movie. So after securing approval from SEGA of Japan, Risley collaborated with producers like Edward Pressman to find the right partner for the project. Concerns were lingering, though, about potential backlash following the failure of the Super Mario Bros. Movie, which was something that SEGA of America CEO Tom Kalinske was keenly aware of, but Risley remained undeterred. August 1994, SEGA struck a deal with MGM Studios and Trilogy Entertainment Group. Meetings ensued to craft the film's storyline, with SEGA adamant about incorporating Sonic's original origin, which, if you don't know, was like Sonic was a dream come true from a little girl who heard stories of a fighter pilot who was the fastest pilot.
Oh, yeah. I knew that.
And his mascot. And now I'm going to jump back to the present day, because if you watch that stream afterwards, Will, the game show game on Twitch, he has a lot of cool Sonic collectibles. Mm-hmm. He has an original like Sonic story and character Bible from like 1992, 1991, 93 maybe.
Where do people get this crazy shit?
This is something that Sonic Retro has all the text like typed out, but no scans. And he has the original document. And you got to go back and watch this on Twitch. It's just search the Game Show Game Twitch. Watch the whole thing because it's a great watch. Will deserves all the views. But when David sees that little thing, because it shows up briefly, he's like, "Oh, I have this," and then he moves on. David's like, "Wait, what was that?" And he goes, "Those words. I know those words." And he's like, "No one's ever seen that document before. Where did you get that?" Like, it's just like, right. It's just so hilarious because, and Will knows what he has. He's taking great care of it, but like, it's so interesting because to David, this is like the foundation of everything that his fandom's kind of built on. Like, he's so into the lore and he's so into this stuff. And this document just appears for a brief moment, and it's kind of like seeing a glimpse of the like Holy Grail. And you're like, wait, no one's ever seen that before, and you just showed it on camera. Right. Where did you get that? Right. I don't think anything new is in that document, but just the fact that he saw what that document was, because we have the text, we don't know where it came from. But SEGA of Japan was adamant that this weird ass like backstory, which you can see briefly in the Sonic Adventure 2 birthday pack. Remember that? And it was like right. the real story of Sonic, and it was like Sonic was a dream from a little girl and a fighter pilot, and you're like, what the hell? And you're going to see that pop up in both of these treatments. I think the filmmakers were like, what the hell are they talking about? This isn't in any of the games. Yeah. But thankfully. Thankfully. And thankfully, like, not in the 2020 Sonic movie. But a preliminary treatment for Sonic the movie was penned by Penn Dansham and Richard B. Lewis. That's not Ken Penders. Introduced... It kind of, but these guys were actually the co-founders of Trilogy Entertainment Group, and we'll talk about them in a little bit. But their treatment actually introduced a reimagined Sonic as a teenager named Jimmy Hedgeman, capable of transforming into the iconic character. The narrative featured a bioengineering mad scientist named Dr. Paul Ellison, who was known by the nickname Robotnik, plotting to mutate humanity by contaminating the Earth's water supply. It was intended as an origin tale with a darker tone. The project aimed to blend live-action animatronics, puppetry, and CGI. However, this version was eventually scrapped in favor of a different direction. So, thanks to Sonic Retro's David the Lurker, we have a synopsis, which you can read on Sonic Retro in addition to the script itself, or the treatment itself. But we're not going to read through 32 pages. We're only going to read through 3. This will be kind of the meat and potatoes of this episode. We'll interject as we read through this, but it's just going to give you guys... you listeners, you girls and boys, a feel of it if you haven't listened through the whole thing. So let's begin. In an isolated jungle, an unknown man is chased by a terrifying group of snakes with wolf-like heads. Stumbling, the man is caught by the creatures, dragged to a pit with a mass of pulsating fungi growing a bright phosphorescent green. Though defiant at first, He screams as a two-headed creature approaches him. George?
At the same time, many miles away, Jimmy the Hedgeman also screams as he joyrides with his friend. 17 years old, he gets pulled over by the police for speeding while attempting to impress two teenage girls sitting in his back seat. His third traffic violation since getting his license. He tries to talk his way out of another ticket. Opening the glove compartment, he accidentally reveals an empty beer can his friend was drinking, causing everyone to be taken to the police station. Darn it. Jimmy reluctantly calls his father, Dr. Hedgeman, to come and pick him up. The doctor, who is currently working on a government-funded program that is trying to unlock the mysteries of the DNA puzzle, is forced to leave his lab. Okay.
The two drive in silence, Jimmy's father turning off the radio. Returning to his lab at Stanford, he tells his son to wait while he continues to work on his experiment. Jimmy, dressed in a bomber jacket with the words "Sonic or Bust" on the back, looks alone at a photograph of his grandfather hung over his father's desk. The man in the image is wearing the same jacket Jimmy is, standing next to an aircraft. Bored, Jimmy wanders into the lab as his father is focused on his experiment, trying to rejuvenate a dying plant. So I'm just going to interject here. This is them satisfying SEGA of Japan's need for that really weird backstory that never really is utilized. Yeah.
Yeah.
And so, so far, this is a very non-Sonic story. And it's, on one hand, I'm like, what were they thinking? Like, what were the screenwriters or the treatment writers, the Trilogy Entertainment guys thinking? But at the same time, what was SEGA of Japan thinking, saying, hey, we want a Sonic the Hedgehog movie and use this as the basis, like, instead of the video games themselves?
Well,
you know?
even the idea that he has a friend that drinks is kind of weird. Like, having your mascot character hang out with friends that drink is probably not the best example you want from your video game movie, especially
right.
Sonic was marketed at kids, so not very good to have a teenage girl speeding car, friend drinking in the passenger seat movie either. So very weird.
It gets worse, George.
Oh gosh,
it gets much worse.
So you want me to start it up?
Yeah, start it up.
Looking at the animals sitting in his father's lab, he pulls out of his cage a hedgehog named Squeakers. He attempts to be funny, but it's cut off once his father realizes what is going on. "Put that back," his father shouts, and soon the two begin to argue. Dr. Hedgeman asks his son when he'll grow up. Jimmy becomes defensive. After all, he only made a mistake, which he can't admit. The two go back and forth, Jimmy's grandfather being brought up at one point. I know, Hedgemans always make their mark. My grandfather was killed trying to break the speed barrier, trying to leave his mark. Why? Oh gosh, because obviously the story, but yeah.
Yeah.
Jimmy's father has had enough, threatening to send his son to military academy. The fight is interrupted by a phone call, which the doctor answers. Jimmy storms out, ready to leave the building until he realizes he forgot his backpack.
Mm-hmm.
Dun, dun, dun.
So after Jimmy leaves, 3 men pretending to be maintenance workers enter the lab.
Wow.
The main one, named Face, has a severe skin condition that makes his skin look like it's almost dripping off his face.
Ugh.
They accost Dr. Hedgeman, asking if he's given thought to their boss's offer. Unlimited funds in a brand new lab if he works for their unnamed benefactor. Dr. Hedgeman tells them no. While they speak, Jimmy returns, overhearing the conversation. Not wanting to be spotted, he hides in a large storage cabinet. From inside, he watches as one of the men pulls out a gun. The doctor uses the cabinet that Jimmy is in as a distraction, throwing it to the floor as he tries to escape. However, Dr. Hedgeman is quickly subdued. Jimmy remains trapped, attempting to get out of the cabinet, only to notice that his hand has been stabbed by a piece of glass. a blue liquid seeping into his wound. He pulls the glass out. His vision gets blurry, and he feels sick for a moment.
Getting free, Jimmy watches as the men leave with his father. He heads to the police station seeking help, but starts talking incredibly fast, making them suspicious. Soon, a high-speed chase begins, Jimmy weaving through traffic, all the while feeling ill, and at one point briefly seeing his hair turn blue. Eventually crashing into a police vehicle, Jimmy runs from the scene in a blink of an eye. He turns to his Spanish teacher, Mrs. Deedhammer, for help. She reluctantly lets him in her house at 3 a.m., where he explains what happened. She humors him, but goes to call the police, learning enough about where the men who kidnapped his father could have come from. He leaves. Can we stop it right here? Like, they're making Sonic the Hedgehog kind of like a werewolf in a way. Like, it's like a curse, or like, I don't know. It seems kind of dark, very like Stephen King-ish, with the whole droopy face man, and this. So that's my thoughts so far.
Yeah, he's like a speed where it's kind of like a cross between the Flash and like the Werehog, where it's like the faster he moves and the more his adrenaline pumps, he turns into Sonic. It is interesting though when you compare this to like the 2020 movie, and obviously I think that movie pulled a lot more inspiration from Sonic X and Sonic Adventure and Sonic Adventure 2. I mean, by the 2020s, the Sonic franchise already had gun, police officers, humans. But back then, we didn't have any of that stuff. So it's really interesting that, like, this movie is introducing, like, the government, the police, high-speed chases through real cities into a Sonic movie. It seems out of place then, but right. it kind of fits now. Like, this is Sonic, though. You have to understand that Jimmy is Sonic. Sonic's not going to appear later.
Right.
This is Sonic. And as we'll see as this story progresses, you keep waiting for Sonic to appear. No, Sonic is in this movie right now. It's Jimmy Hedgeman. So get used to that. And I mean, the Mario movie, which was a year earlier from this, like, it too did kind of similar things where you're like, where's King Koopa? Oh, that's him? Well, he'll turn into King Koopa, right? And he never really does.
Right.
And and Jimmy's kind of like the King Koopa in this movie, where you're just kind of like looking at him and you're like, that's not Sonic.
Right.
Is he going to turn into Sonic? When does he turn into Sonic?
I agree with the mistake is that he's turning into Sonic, so there is no real Sonic, I guess, in the movie, technically. But the tone they're going for kind of reminds me in my head when I'm reading this, more of the TMNT movie adaptation. Like, they're going for more dark, gritty, New York City vibes that other movie had, or Chicago, I guess. For is TMNT in Chicago or in New York?
New York.
Okay.
New York. Okay. Yeah, but when you visualize this movie, I keep seeing it as like a modern movie, but then I have to remind myself, no, think 1994, dark, gritty, and that takes me to, like you said, like TMNT, Batman, Jurassic Park. In fact, when this treatment opens up, they cite Batman and Jurassic Park as kind of like inspirations for for kind of the tone that you would get. So let's dive back in here and see if it gets any better. Meanwhile, Dr. Hedgeman meets the man responsible for his current predicament, Dr. Paul Ellison, a legendary science recluse who made a fortune on the first patent for synthetic blood. Ooh. Presumed dead for the last decade, he begins to tell Dr. Hedgeman his backstory.
Wow.
He was born without fingers on one hand, and he became the fingerless virtuoso, where people would watch him play the violin while feeling sorry for him. As he tells the story, he removes his fingers from one hand, which crawl up Dr. Hedgeman's face and cover his mouth, briefly suffocating him.
What?
Let's pause there for a second. What do you think about that take on So instead of him being Robotnik and the nickname becomes Eggman, he's Paul Ellison and the nickname becomes Robotnik.
That's weird. Because obviously it's Robotnik and his nickname is Eggman. Is that the lore now?
That was the lore then, but
right.
Clearly Paul Ellison. It's such a. I even looked up Dr. Paul Ellison, and there is no real Dr. Paul Ellison under that spelling, but there are like Ellison, and they're just like, chiropractors. Like it's such a.
So Eggman's a chiropractor.
Well, no, but like look at that name. Like imagine if we learn that the video game mad scientist Dr. Ivo Eggman Robotnik, whatever his name was, actually Paul.
Yeah, no, doesn't have the same vibe to it.
I don't get it, and it's Paul through again. This is Robotnik, but it's Paul, just like how Jimmy is Sonic, but he's Jimmy throughout the entire movie. And it's interesting because the only thing I can really see them maybe pulling from, but I don't think it was on TV at the time. Maybe it was the Saturday morning cartoon show with Sonic where Robotnik had a metal arm.
Right.
And again, if I'm not going to pull it off the wall, but the concept art from Saturday morning Robotnik that I have, he's part human, part machine. So he does have like some mechanical parts. So I think that's kind of like what they were pulling from here. Maybe some of those early concepts, but yeah. So eventually he tells Dr. Hedgeman why he has brought him to the island. He wants to eliminate the world's imperfections and frailties, which deprive all organisms of living in communal harmony. And he plans to find the key to manipulating DNA so he can transform the essence of life in all creatures and humankind into elite perfection. And
I like it.
I brought it up on the Game Show Game stream read-through, but I'll bring it up here too. Doesn't this remind you of Sony's The Amazing Spider-Man with how the lizard, what he wanted to do?
Right. But he wanted to use like lizard DNA?
So, first off, he was born without an arm, and then he grew one, which is kind of like the fingerless virtuoso. And then as he became the lizard, he saw humans as being like weak and that he needed to turn everyone into lizards.
Which makes sense if you think about it from a guy that doesn't have an arm's point of view.
Right. So it's very interesting that Sony, which actually did for a time have the rights to the Sonic the Hedgehog movie, not this version, did make a movie that had a villain who had a very similar affliction and MO as he became evil.
Right.
Why don't you
But did they laugh at him while they
I want to
play
see
piano?
how bad this gets.
Pretending to be his father, Jimmy is able to book a flight to South America. While on the plane, he experiences dizziness and nausea. His palms are also turning blue. Before anyone can see what is going on, he rushes to the bathroom, causing a commotion. He tries to play it off as nothing once he emerges. Once the plane lands, he approaches some locals to charter a boat and arrive in the island he believes his father to be on. He is led away from the city, mugged, then thrown into a river. Wow. Left to drown. Everyone knows Sonic can swim. He miraculously survives, emerging on an unknown island in the middle of the night. Hearing the wildlife, he grabs a rock to defend himself. His focus suddenly shifts to the worms he sees living under the rock. Hit with hunger, Jimmy uncontrollably eats the worms. He notices his reflection in a nearby water. Realizing he looks like some kind of strange animal, quotes, he climbs up a tree, throws up, and turns back into Jimmy before being grabbed from behind, passing out. So it's like he's transforming into a creature called Sonic the Hedgehog, the werewolf of the night, the bug eater, worm eater.
Right. And a few things that this synopsis omits from the treatment is that on the plane, Jimmy is drinking little liqueur bottles, so he's a drunk. He also jokingly asks the flight attendant for the Sports Illustrated swimsuit issue, which she gives him, and he runs into the bathroom. And so I think the joke would have been like people thought he was going to go in there to masturbate. And I think also there is a joke about hairy palms because his hands are turning like hairy. And, you know, there's that old wives' tale where it's like, oh, if you masturbate, you're going to grow hair on your palms. So this is our hero. Like, Jimmy he's not heroic. He's not cool. He doesn't like chili dogs. And then when he turns into Sonic, he's an animal hedgehog. Right. He's not Sonic the Hedgehog. So he's like literally eating what hedgehogs eat and not eating like chili dogs.
Right.
So Jimmy, I mean, we're almost to the end here. We're at like Act 2. Jimmy's unlikable.
Right.
Sonic is you can't. They're hinting what he looks like, so Sonic's not even present, and the Sonic that we have is basically a blue real life hedgehog who can run really fast. It gets worse though, so I'm going to continue here. When Jimmy awakes, he finds himself strapped to a stretcher. He meets Amanda Morgan, a half girl, half wild woman, accompanied by some mutant creatures. Yeah, and Amanda Morgan. So there's no like video game equivalent to her. She's not Amy Rose. Sonic Extreme at this point, I don't think much is known about it, but I know there was like a girl in that one, but it's not her. So she's just kind of like the female character for this movie who has no video game equivalent. However, she is accompanied by some mutant creatures, and one of them is named Kentar.
Ooh.
Which sounds like Ken Pender, like Kentar.
Right.
Who is eventually nicknamed Knuckles by Jimmy because his hands drag on the ground. Jimmy is taken to a mutant village, and he is presented to Taticus, the village elder. Taticus is unimpressed, giving the villagers... What's that?
I said, obviously, he's not the real Sonic. I would be unimpressed, too.
Well, and yeah, so Taticus gives the villagers permission to kill Sonic.
Good, yeah.
Amanda begs him to spare Jimmy's life, telling Taticus that she's seen him transform, and he should be allowed the test to prove it. So Jimmy is taken to a hut, and where he lies bruised and battered when Amanda visits him, bringing him food. She calls him Sonic, assuming the name on his jacket is his, and she tells him that he has a chance for reprisal from death. So let's see what this test is.
The next day, Jimmy faces Knuckles. He tries to transform but doesn't know how. Knuckles easily overcoming him. Head underwater, Jimmy is about to drown when he finally turns into the blue blur. He emerges as Sonic the Hedgehog, easily overcoming Knuckles' strength. Before the fight can end, the two helicopters fly overhead, accompanied by a group of snake hunters on the ground. The force has been sent by Ellison, looking to capture some of the past failures to feed his most recent creation. Chaos ensues, with multiple mutants, including Knuckles, being captured. Before Amanda can be caught, Sonic rushes over to rescue her, the pair fleeing into the jungle. It is only after the raid that Jimmy learns that who Ellison is, and that Amanda's father once worked for Ellison. Her father, after hiding her in the mutant village, went missing. Dun dun dun.
So Paul Ellison made these experiments, and when they failed, some of them escaped and created this village. So
very TMNT.
Yeah. So, and Amanda Morgan, you know, she's there. She's like the girl surrounded by all these wacky mutants. Now, it's worth pointing out that at this time, Trilogy Entertainment Group was developing the Tank Girl movie. Oh. And Tank Girl released, I think, 1994, 1995. It was definitely something that was happening within the studio at the same time. And I know they didn't create the Tank Girl story, but the Tank Girl story is very kind of similar to this. Like, it's like a girl, like a wild girl, who hangs out with a bunch of like mutant guys, right? Like these animal creatures. So I have to wonder if they were like kind of cribbing from their own projects for this. They're like, well, let's have Amanda Morgan kind of be like Tank Girl, and the mutants like with Knuckles, Kentar, and Taticus.
Great names.
Being kind of like those like dog camel creatures that Tank Girl hangs out with. So yeah, here we are now. So we're entering the third act, and if you take a look at the transcript, if you're listening to this or watching, Act 3 is very short. There's not much dialogue, a lot of descriptions, and things just kind of wrap up. It's almost like at this point they were like, "Oh man, we are like 25 pages in. Let's just end this. We got to get this done and sent over to SEGA." So, looking over footage from the raid, Ellison notices an unknown human killing one of the helicopter pilots for letting him escape. Oh, Ellison kills him, yeah. He orders Face. Now, Face, remember, is that guy from the beginning. Throughout the treatment, Face appears quite often. He's basically like the Agent Stone or Snively, or Orbot or Scratch and Grounder. Like he's Paul Ellison's. Yeah, exactly. So this has got to be the weakest depiction of Robotnik with the weakest right-hand man.
And the weakest Sonic the Hedgehog.
And the weakest Sonic the Hedgehog. And when the first Sonic movie came out, and I have it sitting here, I guess I'll hold it up. When the first Sonic movie came up, I'll admit I was like a little negative on Agent Stone in this one. I was like, he's funny, but like he's no Orbot or even Scratch and Grounder. Like, he's all right. But man, like Face is the worst. And
yeah.
And also when you read this too, they describe Face and his guys as being South American. So they're like these deformed South American guys. So it's kind of like, oh, that's nice to turn the only Spanish speaking guys in this movie into like the deformed bad guys.
They didn't have any actors that they pitched in the script, or
no one. No. And in fact, after we did the read through, we kind of like we're like, well, who would have been in this? And we could only really think of actors who maybe were in the Mario movie or in Tank Girl, but I don't think anyone after the Mario movie would say yes to a Sonic movie, so it's like Christopher Walken, maybe, like, I don't know, it's really hard to say. The descriptions don't really evoke anyone. And Paul Ellison, like, who would Paul Ellison be? Who would Jimmy be? Like, we were thinking about actors in the mid-90s, like, who was hot? Well, Jonathan Taylor Thomas was too young. Macaulay Culkin, no. Like, who? So it's just kind of like it would have been
Terminator 2.
I think he'd be too old. Well, maybe, but I don't know. Yeah, maybe. So let's see here. Let's get back to the treatment. Okay, so he orders Face to find him, but the captured Knuckles offers his services in exchange for Ellison to leave him and the other villagers alone. He explains that the stranger has the ability to transform into a mutant. Ellison gives Knuckles 24 hours to capture Jimmy. Afterwards, Dr. Hedgeman, who recognized his son in the footage, is able to discover Ellison's true plan to have the world be covered in his mutated creations and to transform all of humanity into half-human, half-creature beings. Jimmy and Amanda gather a small team of mutants to storm Ellison's compound, but they are immediately stopped. Jimmy blames himself, but Tadicus reassures him, saying, I believe you will be the one to lead my people to freedom. You must learn to harness your skills and learn quickly. Before Tadicus can fully train Jimmy, he is shot by Face. Oof. He is not shot in the face, he's shot by Face.
Right.
Knuckles discovers the Elder's body and, feeling betrayed, tells the villagers what Ellison's plans are. Jimmy learns to control his Sonic abilities, and once again, they storm the compound. This time, Sonic is captured.
Always.
And it's worth noting here, this is the most video game part because Knuckles works with Robotnik, essentially, and turns on Sonic.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, so, I guess so, in a way.
And I think I should bring it up now. George, who's missing? Who is
Tails.
missing from this?
Everyone's favorite sidekick. He doesn't have a friend. Maybe the guy that was drinking next to him, that was in the co-pilot seat, was Tails. Like, he's all, that's my friend, Miles. He's crazy. He drinks all the time. Maybe. But I guess they're both alcoholics, right? Like, he also drinks, Sonic.
Yeah, the only thing I can think of as closest to Tails is there's this giant two-headed monster, but that's like two heads, not two tails. And they don't... I guess they'd call him heads. So I don't know. It's very strange that this came out... So 93. So Knuckles was most definitely like a known entity at this time.
Right.
So he was kind of hot. Maybe that's why they were like, well, Tails was 1992. Let's not include him. But it is really weird that like Tails is not like, instead of this girl, maybe she has like a brother, like a little brother who's mutated and he's Tails. Like they never really work him in. It's unfortunate.
I will say though, I think we're lucky to have sometimes the internet where we could see scripts come out and leak early, and companies could be like, okay, we're not doing that. That's obviously a really bad idea.
Yeah.
Like the Sonic the Hedgehog movie with the design being redone. I feel like back in the old days, that's why we got so many bad video game adaptations, because they had no fans to be like, no, this is dumb. You guys are just doing something so stupid that's nothing like the IP you're trying to represent.
The closest thing that this treatment actually reminds me of is the Michael Bay produced Ninja Turtles, which early leaks were saying that they weren't mutants, they were aliens. They were also saying that Shredder is not in the movie. He's not a Japanese man. He's actually Colonel Schrader, and that he is like an American military guy who idolizes Japanese culture and like built a mech suit. And then when that stuff leaked, people got upset. So they, during reshoots or during production, they tweaked it so that Colonel Schrader was in the movie, but he was being controlled by Shredder, which is weird to keep the name Schrader when you're clearly like, he was Shredder, but now Shredder's in it. So we have Schrader and Shredder. They also did a little joke where it was like, what are you, aliens? And they're like, no, we're mutants,
poking fun at the original.
Yeah, another one that comes to mind, unrelated, but Ghostbusters 2016, they wrote in a scene where they were like saying that people were leaving sexist comments about them. Remember that?
Right, I do remember that. They like poked at
and it was like
feedback.
They poked the bear, yeah. Right. But in this case, it's like, yeah, like, man. So let's hear about Sonic being strapped to a table.
All right, so where we left off, our man Tadicus was shot by a mutant called Face, and Sonic was captured. Yeah. So Sonic is strapped to a table. Ellison monitoring Sonic. Every 2 minutes, blood is drawn. Ellison studying it. Sonic nicknames Ellison Robotnik for his cold mechanical methodology. Using Sonic's DNA, Ellison is able to find the missing piece of his master plan. With a finalized serum, he prepares the rocket that will launch with the help of the volcano his base is stationed around. He tells his henchmen to take Sonic and Dr. Hedgeman away. They are cast into the pit of the two-headed creature, And as they run, the pair have a heart-to-heart moment. Luckily, Amanda and Knuckles are able to rescue them from the creature. Reunited, the four go to stop Ellison. Dr. Hedgeman sends out an SOS as the others fight Ellison and his forces. During the fight, Ellison grabs a DNA serum, transforming into a hideous, gigantic mutation beyond anything we've seen so far. That's
Super Shredder.
Dang, he's Super Shredder. I know. Are we gonna have a Vanilla Ice track on this too? Like,
I hope
Sonic.
so.
Sonic tries to attack him, but nothing seems to work. Finally, he gathers all his energy, aka the Spirit Bomb, and spins through the volcanic rock to the launching pad. That has the DNA serum rocket, causing the volcano to come alive. The heat ruins the DNA capsules, and the base crumbles as Sonic, Amanda, Knuckles, and Dr. Hedgeman escape. So that's the climax, which, honestly, remembering back like with movies with Spawn and stuff, this is going to look horrible. Can you imagine a freaky, hairy Sonic the Hedgehog human man rolling around in Volcano?
I can't. And his plan here is to use a volcano to shoot DNA, but volcanoes are hot and heat can destroy DNA samples, which Jurassic Park taught us need to be frozen. Very cold, like cryogenically frozen. So not too smart. What do you think about Robotnik finally being mentioned in like the final moments of the film?
It's very Hollywood. I don't know why Hollywood always does this, where they're like, yeah, I know it's not really Eggman, but in the end of the movie, he'll be Eggman. It's like, why can't he just be Eggman the whole movie? Like, that's I hate, it's a trope that they do in Hollywood movies where it's like, it's not really Mario until the end. Well, it's like, I want to watch a movie that's called Mario, so just give me Mario, give me Sonic right away.
Well, like, going back to the 2020 movie, I mean, at least he was Robotnik. He had the mustache, but he wasn't bald. He had the robots at least, and if you recall, before the movie even came out, in the trailer, they showed the final scene of him as Robotnik, because I think they were afraid that it was just too off base, and so they were like, look, at some point he's going to turn into the video game version you know and love. But what's funny is that I remember I was one of the people saying this when that trailer came out for the Sonic movie in 2020. It was like, that's going to be that's the post-credit scene, I'll bet you. And we're right. It was.
Right. Because, I mean, this is how Hollywood kind of does these kind of reveals.
Right. And at least with the 2020 movie, the only thing Sonic was lacking was his shoes, and he at least got those like halfway through the movie instead of at the end. Mm-hmm. But I look back and I watched that. I watched the first Sonic movie last week. It holds up. It's very good. But Sonic lacking his shoes for most of the movie just really hurts his design. Like that. That's why I love the second one so much. I got the poster right there. You know, I got the 4K Blu-ray here. But like the design of him is so much better, and he's got his iconic shoes the whole film, which is just great. And Robotnik looks like Robotnik, and Tails is in it, and Knuckles is in it. Like this, not to like fangasm, but like Sonic the Hedgehog 2 is probably one of my favorite Sonic things in recent memory. Because it just does so much right.
Mania? Better than Superstars or whatever? Better than, I don't know. Trying to name stuff.
Well, it's just like it does so many things right, and reading through this the first time I did, and reading through with you now, it's just like, what were they thinking? It's so generic. It's not generic. It's weird. Like, it's actually very original, but to the point of being like, what the hell is this? This is not Sonic the Hedgehog. I'll read the last few sentences here just to wrap it up, but the mutant villagers cheer as Ellison is defeated. In the distance, help can be seen, coming to evacuate the island. Dr. Hedgeman apologizes to his son and tells him he is proud. Jimmy returns the apology, then declares, "You thought it was rough raising an ordinary teenager? You ain't seen nothing yet."
Oh my god! And then it's like the Star Wars like epic orchestra theme.
The Sonic, yeah.
Directed by Steven Spielberg, obviously, on the screen.
Yeah.
Another epic has come to a close.
Suffice to say, however that phrase goes, SEGA did not like what they saw.
Why?
I actually have here, and this is...
They didn't want an alcoholic mascot?
So this kind of what I'm holding in my hands kind of completed my journey from 2016 to now, 8 years in the making. I never wanted the original treatment. I just wanted to have a copy for myself. So this is Barry's. This is all mine. And anyone can print this out.
Oh my god.
But I always thought this was interesting. What is this? Is this an F minus?
Somebody gave it so they reviewed it as an F minus.
I don't know, because I don't know if that's someone's name. Like, oh, this is Frank's. But like, why would you put F?
Minus.
But throughout it, there are little notes. Here's a one. We actually have it below us. Not funny. It's on the graphic for us. There are some things, though, where, like, I like this. Some things just, like, clarifying things, but they'll say, like, make this Robotnik. Why would he hate hedgehogs? What is his motivation? Like, I don't think they liked Paul Ellison.
It's screenwriting 101, right? Like, the stuff they're saying.
There's also little bits they didn't understand, like, Jimmy shakes. He splashes cold water on his face. Grappling for a towel, he accidentally knocks the light out overhead the sink. In an airplane, like, you can't... Airplane lights aren't...
Right.
Like, light bulbs. They're built in. That's how they operate. So how could a towel... You don't have towels in airplane bathrooms. It's just kind of like really weird logic.
I feel like making Hollywood movies in the 90s, you didn't really have to have that much talent. Because, even if as kids, like, how many movies came out that were, like, super horrible? And
there's a lot of weird... Yeah, well, there's even more weird things in this. Like, there's a whole bit with Dr. Hedgeman finding a belt in his room, which actually belonged to Amanda Morgan's father. And the belt has a code written on it, and that code is how you unlock Robotnik's computer.
All right.
But, like, why would he hide a code on a belt, and why would it be in his room, and why wouldn't his room be cleared out after he was killed in the opening sequence? Like,
they were lovers, and he knew.
Maybe. Dr. Robotnik and Agent Stone are kind of lovers in Sonic 2, so...
Platonic or otherwise, depends on who you are.
So that's that treatment. Now we're going to go into Wonders of the World. So
I love that
SEGA
name.
and
Wonders of
what's
the
that?
World. Wonders of the World. I love that name. Like, it's such a weird... It has nothing to do with Sonic, Speed, or anything. It sounds like a Mickey movie.
Sonic the Hedgehog, Wonders of the World. Yeah, I don't know what they were thinking. It's almost like, just call it Sonic the Movie. You don't need to give it a new name. Like, this is just, yeah. So SEGA and Trilogy Entertainment enlisted screenwriter Richard Jeffries, with whom Risley had collaborated at Marvel with to develop a Silver Surfer feature film. Jeffries, after discussions with Yuji Naka and the SEGA Technical Institute members, commenced work on their initial treatment named Sonic Wonders of the World. This was completed on May 18th, 1995, and the 8-page outline revolves around a 12-year-old named Josh Pinsky, who brings Sonic the Hedgehog into the real world while playing Sonic Extreme. The storyline involves Sonic and his friend thwarting Dr. Robotnik's plan to digitize natural wonders into a virtual reality theme park. Although Shinobu Toyota of SEGA America's executive vice president, supported the concept. He expressed a desire for a formidable antagonist beyond Robotnik, aiming to introduce a fresh dynamic to the Sonic universe. Because, Sonic was only, 2 years old at this time. We need a new villain. What are you doing?
Old news. I think that's what screenwriters say when they want to make it their own. Right.
And so, yeah, it's interesting that, clearly Sega did not like this treatment that we just went through.
You mean the classic?
The classic with Jimmy Hedgeman. But there are elements that they kind of carried over, like a boy, but the boy is now not Sonic. He's Sonic's friend. What do you think about all these names in these Sonic movies? Jimmy Hedgeman, Josh Pinsky, Tom Wachowski. Everything's like Pinsky, Wachowski.
There's lame. Nobody remembers
Chris
them.
Thorndike.
Do you really care about Thorndike and all these other characters? There's some hardcore people, but we're here for Sonic, right? That's what the show is. So I know why they make them, because they need to save money on CGI, so the characters are there, so they won't have to do an animated or puppet the whole time. So I get it, but it's annoying. I don't really like them. I hated them as kids.
I mean, not even talking about human characters, but just the naming. I have to wonder if they were looking at Robotnik, and they're like, well, let's get some other weird, vaguely, I don't know, Eastern European sounding names or something, Pinsky, Wachowski, Robotnik. I don't know what the thought process was there, but this treatment, so this one was actually discovered, I think in 2023, by the Saturday morning historian, Sonic Sat AM historian. Scans are featured on his Twitter account. Let me see Sat AM historian, during his research for his Sonic the Hedgehog Saturday morning book, which he's been talking about for years. I don't know when this is coming out. But he actually received these from Miss Risley, who we were talking about earlier. And these were given to him March 8th, 2022. So the pages that he was given are pages 1, the cover page, 1, 2, 3, and then there was page 4, 5, and then 8. And then so 2 pages are missing. It was also stated that Trilogy withdrew because Sega kept insisting on that bomber jacket origin story.
Oh my god, dude, can you imagine?
I know, and according to Michelin, the film had no basis on the Saturday morning series because, in her words, that skewed very young, and in order to do a film at a budget and magnitude, you need to create for a wider audience. Still, they never said that it was not something they were aware of, which brings me back to Paul Ellison and his robotic fingers, kind of reminding me of the Saturday morning Robotnik. So I feel like there was something there that they were pulling from for that. But Face, who was Face? Who was Kentar and the Elder? And so this treatment, though, it's much shorter. It's from a Hollywood screenwriter who attempted a Silver Surfer movie. So we're not going to read through the whole thing. Again, I just have a short summary of the treatment. I can read through the whole thing. It's only a couple paragraphs. And then we can discuss it. So here we go. 12-year-old Josh Pinsky faces a predicament when his unfinished school report on Sonic, a daring pilot adorned in a leather jacket with a blue hedgehog on it, attempting to break the sound barrier, leaves him with a looming deadline. So basically, Josh was giving a report on Sonic the Hedgehog, who is a real video game in this movie universe, but he starts talking about the pilot and leather jacket, and his classmates laugh at him because I think they're like, "What the hell are you talking about, right, Josh?" Josh lives with his out-of-work and imaginative father, Hal Pinsky. So here we are with still kind of that family dynamic that we had with the Sonic the movie with the Jimmy Hedgeman, his Dr. Hedgeman, but here it's Josh Pinsky and Hal Pinsky, who's still a scientist, but in a different field. Hal Pinsky's recent project involves the Extremely Radical Intelligence, or XRI. Josh secretly utilizes the XRI to complete his report.
Oh, nice.
He connects his Sega Saturn to the computer, and Josh inadvertently brings Sonic the Hedgehog into the real world.
So
Chaos
powerful.
ensues as Sonic explores the apartment unaware of a transformed Dr. Robotnik who escapes the screen, setting stage for an adventure. And I should note that Sega Saturns could be connected to computers, I believe. I don't think they knew this. The screenwriter knew this, but there actually is recently some printer software leaked or on eBay. So yeah, XRI kind of did exist, but it did much more boring things like word processing.
So so far, what I see here is Hal's probably a name taken from the Kubrick film.
Yeah.
Because they start talking about AI and all this with XRI, and then it does your homework just like ChatGPT. So this is futuristic for sure. I do like the idea that they plug in a Sega Saturn, because there's other movies at this time period that sponsored Sega Game Gear, for example, in some sort of surfing California type ninja movie that will stay unnamed. So I like that bit. It's cheesy, but it's the good type of cheesy where a Sega Saturn's being used. I'm okay with that.
And so this would have been 1995. Sonic Extreme would have been released, even though it actually didn't. So this would have been cross-promotion for that game. People were saying, oh, yeah, this Wonders of the World was a Sonic Extreme movie. It wasn't. It was like a commercial
for
that game, essentially.
And the console.
Yeah, I mean, it's not too different from how Sonic X Shadow Generations is coming out at the same time as Sonic 3. And Sonic 3 is going to have scenes from Sonic Adventure 2 basically in it. So it's, again, cross-promotion. As Josh tries to conceal Sonic's presence, Robotnik schemes to exploit the real world. Sonic's weakening state becomes apparent, and they discover that the only way to recharge him is with the power of a Chaos Emerald. Together, they embark on a mission to locate the emeralds hidden in ordinary rocks. Meanwhile, Robotnik sets up a base at an abandoned amusement park, recruiting bullies transformed into bully bots to find Chaos Emeralds. Hal secures a job at the newly reopened Botnik Land amusement park, unaware of Robotnik's nefarious plans to digitize natural wonders and replace children with Kinderbot roboclones. I kind of like this. I like how Robotnik's in the real world, and since he can't find a bunch of animals, he just starts putting kids inside of robots. I think that's funny. Yeah. I like the amusement park. It plays off of his he always wanted an amusement park,
for
so
some
it makes
reason.
sense that
yeah,
his even in the modern movies, that Robotnik does not care about amusement parks or a Robotnik land, but this is very in line with the video game version, I think. I think it's really lame how a big plot point is looking for emeralds and ordinary rocks. How is that interesting?
It's like trying to show kids, some kids have fascinations with rocks when they're young. Maybe they're trying to be if you look into rocks, maybe you'll find a Chaos Emerald, and now you have a bunch of kids in the 90s hitting rocks against the sidewalks.
Maybe, but it sounds like a really boring plot point. I appreciate how, going back to the 2022 Sonic movie, how that story was, there was only one emerald. It was the Master Emerald, but then they reveal that all the Chaos Emeralds were hidden inside of it, which is not too crazy, given that in the games, the Master Emerald could shatter and contain chaos. So chaos, chaos emeralds, master, like it makes sense. But here it's like, look inside ordinary rocks. It's like every rock in the world? Like what is this movie? So when Sonic gets captured by Robotnik, Josh, with the support of his parents, uses the XRI to teleport to the game world. Joined by Sonic, they confront and defeat Robotnik, leading to a heartfelt moment of family bonding. As they return to the real world, Sonic chooses to stay behind. Josh promises never to misuse the XRI, a sentiment echoed by Sonic's playful wink.
Creepy.
Winking
is always creepy.
So how do you think, and this treatment's only 8 pages compared to the 30-page epic of Sonic the movie, but how do you think this treatment compares to the first one, and which do you prefer?
This one by a lot, because it has a Sega Saturn, it has the game world, so it kind of reminds me of Toy Soldiers, or one of those like Indian in the cupboard kind of stories where something that's fake comes out real, becomes real, and so it's kind of like a tried and true story. I think it's connects to the whatever Sonic game would have been out at this moment. It also promotes the Sega Saturn, which needed to be promoted. It sounds like a decent enough script. I think the only thing that would needed to be changed would be the Chaos Emeralds bit, but that also, at least they had Chaos Emeralds. Like, what do? They didn't even save the day. What was the point? So maybe less on the AI and more on the Chaos Emeralds or something, like the Chaos Emeralds in the real world, why they exist in our world, I don't know, from the video game. Bring Sonic out instead of an AI, because who made the AI? It doesn't make any sense. It says his like or dad or whatever that is unemployed. Weird. But yeah, besides that.
Yeah, I prefer Wonders of the World just as like, it sounds like a better plot for a movie, and it's one that wouldn't make me like, freak out as a kid. But at the same time, I love how insane Sonic the movie is. It's like it one-ups Mario Brothers the movie. Like, it's even weirder.
Right.
It's so weird. This one really feels like that Ken Penders Archie comic Sonic Live, where 2 kids have Sonic come into the real world. I think there was even like Yuji Naka or like Sonic Team Japanese game developers made cameos. Like, that reminds me of Pixels too, that movie.
Right.
I actually, again, going back to the new movies, or going forward to the new movies, I really like how Sonic is from like a planet of animals, and Knuckles is from there, and Tails is from there, and our world is linked with them through the big rings. Like, as much as I love the Sonic video games, it's always been really hard for me to come to grips with like the fact that it's just like a human world too, and there's like the same world that has Green Hill Zone and like the events of the Genesis games is also home to like Earth essentially, and it's become even harder to like make that connection, because the IDW comics will not show humans, and the video games have not shown humans since 2008, which is crazy. Like, it's been 15 years since a Sonic the Hedgehog video game has shown us humans and animals in the same world, which makes me think like the video games are moving away from that. Like, they're not making like the Sonic Adventure games and Sonic Unleashed non-canon, but it's very weird how now with Sonic X Shadow Generations coming out, Maria's presumably going to be referenced, but like that'll probably be the first human appearance in a Sonic game in 15 years, which kind of blows my mind. Like a Sonic Generations remaster is going to be the first time we see a human, presumably since 2008, outside of Robotnik. That's weird, right?
Right. And
even Generations, when they had Unleashed levels, I don't think there were any humans. I walked around and looked for them. I didn't see them.
And I mean, do you think that Sega needed to chase the video game movie trend at this time? I know there was a lot of people that had it, but do you think that like that Mario and those type of movies sold because of the video game? I mean, because it had a movie, or do you think they were just good games? That's one thing that I don't understand about all this.
Yeah, I think at the time Sonic was at his peak. That was so in Sonic the Hedgehog history, I feel like there has been 3 very important moments where Sonic was at his peak cultural significance. I would say it was Sonic and Knuckles, Sonic 3 and Knuckles, basically around that time when he had MTV specials, 2 cartoon shows, million selling game, like multi-million selling games, however many copies were sold. The second one is the launch of the Dreamcast in 99. We had the video games, we had the animated movie, which I'm holding here. Maybe not as big, but it was the first big 3D Sonic game. And the third one I would say was 2022 with Sonic the Hedgehog 2, Sonic Frontiers. What else came out that year? Was it Sonic Mania Plus or Sonic Origin? Something like that. But McDonald's Happy Meals, Sonic appearing at the Macy's Thanksgiving Day Parade. Like 2020 to 2022 was probably on par with 93, 94, 95 for Sonic. So it makes sense that they were really pushing for a movie back then. And it makes sense that a movie finally came to fruition, like almost 30 years later?
Yeah, it feels that way for sure, yeah.
25 years. So, but I think it's very interesting that Mario had his first movie in 93, and it was that abysmal all live action crazy shit that basically is on par with the Sonic movie treatment we just read through. And then his next movie is an animated film that is so close to the video games that it almost feels like you're watching an extended video game cutscene.
Right.
Whereas Sonic's first movie finally comes to fruition in 2020, and it has kind of more in common with these treatments than like the Mario movie we eventually got, or Jackson Daxter the movie, or really any... Like, there were so many CG animated video game movies in the last few years, and yet Sonic, the closest we got was Sonic Prime on Netflix to do something like that.
Oh, yeah.
So, do you think it's weird that, like, they stuck with this, even though the movies that we got were from a completely different team? There's no one who worked on these Trilogy Entertainment movies worked on the films we're seeing now, and yet there's still that real world. Sonic's from somewhere else. He's not from a video game, and he's not a mutant, but he's an alien, essentially, from another world.
I just feel like... I think the reason that Sonic did it wasn't because of the old treatments, but more of like... It's been kind of the trends in Hollywood in the 2010s and in late 2000s to make a... Garfield comes out and he lives in the real world, and that's like kind of like the comedic joke is like they're the fish out of water, they're the cartoon you read but in our world. And I think as fans of the property, that's actually kind of a funny concept if you think about it. Like the idea, even as a kid, you'd be like, what would it be like if Sonic actually was here with us right now from his game world? And I guess it's like a easy to write story, and it gives I don't know. I think some movies do it better. I think Sonic's probably been the best one to do it. At least resonated with fans. I don't know a lot of Smurf fans or a lot of Garfield fans and how they feel about the Chipmunks fans. I don't know how they feel about those movies. I know that they had, what's his name? The guy from My Name is Earl in one of them. That's pretty cool. But
playing Dave, right?
Right, yeah. But...
Well... I'll raise my hand. I was actually a Chipmunks fan when I was a kid. I really liked the movie, The Chipmunk Adventure. I liked the cartoon show. And when those live-action movies started coming out, I didn't know what the hell they were because, like, the chipmunks were, like, chipmunk-sized and they were CG.
Did you have the movie, the Chipmunk, the animated movie that they released on like VHS.
Oh yeah, I had
had
the
it,
VHS, the DVD, the Blu-ray. I had the movie poster in my room as a kid. That's
Great
an
movie.
epic movie poster.
That's a great movie.
Yeah, I love that movie. I watched it recently, and my kids love it. So it's like it holds up. But yeah, that's right. Like this movie, the Sonic movie we eventually got is very much in line with like the live action Garfield, the Chipmunks, where Sonic appears as close as he can to his video game counterpart, but he's real.
Right.
And I think these two treatments go in two very different directions. One is Sonic is essentially Roger Rabbit, and the one before that is Sonic is essentially a werewolf of a little boy, or a 17-year-old boy. But the thing is Jimmy Hedgeman is not Sonic. He shares none of Sonic's characteristics, which makes him such a terrible protagonist, because you're looking at this kid and like for example, going back to Jim Carrey, he looks nothing like the Robotnik we know and love, but he evokes him. He acts like him. He just doesn't look like him until the very end of the film. Whereas in this, like Jimmy Hedgeman, he is nothing like Sonic, and he's unlikable. And so even when Sonic's not on screen, you're not like, well, at least we got Jimmy Hedgeman, and he reminds me of Sonic. No.
They could literally drag and drop any video game or any movie. Like, oh, he's turning into a Wolfman, or he's turning into, I don't know, Wolverine or
Sly
a mutant.
Cooper.
Right, Sly Cooper, anyone. Tumba, like any character, literally.
Tomba,
yeah, like whatever. Why not?
So, according to Jeffries, the screenwriter of Wonders of the World, the treatment was well received. However, there was some concerns at SEGA of Japan. Risley, director of entertainment and consumer products, said, we were all very nervous about it. I was at Amblin when we were in the midst of Roger Rabbit. I was just the assistant to executive producer Kathleen Kennedy, but I saw what was going on. It's a very complicated process, and I think more than us, Japan was very nervous. And I'll just interject here. There's a great video from, I think the channel is Yesterworld, about the making of Roger Rabbit. There is absolutely no way that SEGA of Japan and Trilogy Entertainment could match what they did with Roger Rabbit, because that was lightning in a bottle. The talent that they had working on that were still like stretching themselves thin to make that happen. So I cannot imagine Wonders of the World working in the end. It would have looked like a very shitty, like what's the equivalent? Cool World. Remember that movie?
Right.
Which was actually worked on by Adventures of Sonic the Hedgehog character designer Milton Knight worked on that movie. That was like a failed attempt at recapturing what Roger Rabbit did. So I could see the Sonic Wonders of the World kind of being like that, where it's like, oh, it's not very visually... it's just like a cartoon overlaid on live action. It's not like Roger Rabbit where the camera moved around and he felt like a 3D character. Before Richard Jeffries could receive any notes from SEGA and start writing the first draft, the project was shelved at both MGM Studios and Trilogy Entertainment. The production company, unable to find common ground with SEGA regarding their requests for the story, pulled out of their agreement with SEGA. Penn Dansham of Trilogy Entertainment said, I pulled us out of the project when I realized that SEGA wanted to hold on to the original developer's origin story, which I could not see working in a film structure, and they did not want to insult the game developer by letting us work on a more feature-friendly approach. Trilogy Entertainment would go on to refund MGM Studios the development fees incurred during pre-production. Without the backing of MGM, SEGA allowed Jeffries to try to sell the treatment he had written to another film studio. He approached DreamWorks, but the studio was not interested in picking up the project, citing the cost to license the property. With that, the project in its current state would cease all development. Since the Trilogy Entertainment Group attempts, Archie Sonic writer Ken Penders attempted his own Sonic movie pitch. in 2003. I said 94 in the notes, but I think it was 2003, which is a Sega talk for another time, because I very much think we're going to have unreleased Ken Pender's Sonic movie, 1993 happening, because that's something else. In 2013, the film rights were acquired by Sony, and if you remember, George, the WikiLeaks Sony emails had them going back and forth. Yeah. So they were like, we have the rights to Console Wars, but we also have the rights to a Sonic movie. And I remember they were like, we can't make both of those. And it was like, what are you talking about? That's like saying we have the rights to Star Wars and we have the rights to the making of Star Wars.
Can't make both of those.
About? Yes, you can.
You have like a Beatles, unreleased Beatles album, but you're also doing the documentary, but you're like, I can't release the Beatles album, sorry.
Yeah, I can't do a documentary on the Beatles album and the Beatles album, so I'm just going to scrap both of them. Right. And yeah, famously, they didn't even know how to spell hedgehog. They called him Hedgedog. And Close. We tweeted that out, and Tom Kalinske thought Sonic was going to turn into a dog. And now that Now that I know the treatments that he read in 1994, I can understand why he believed that. Because he's like, oh my God, Jimmy Hedgeman. Right. Now he's a dog.
Oh, yeah.
Sony, basically the Sony project remained in development until 2017 when the film rights were acquired by Paramount. And of course, we covered that in Sega Talk number 43. Oh, 2022 saw Sonic 2 the movie. In 2024, we'll see a Knuckles miniseries, which comes out April 26th this year, and Sonic 3, which comes out this Christmas, which will act as an adaptation of Sonic Adventure 2. So, having known what we know now, George, did we dodge a bullet?
I think the second movie could have worked for the 90s, and I think it probably would have been more of like the equivalent to like, trying to think of a movie like Three Ninjas, where like everyone hated it that was over the age of 12, but we would have liked it as kids of the era and probably would have seen it fondly with fond memories. So I don't think the second treatment was impossible. I think they could have even added this lame origin story. Maybe that his dad was like, it doesn't even make any sense. So his dad, like Sonic the Hedgehog grandpa broke the speed break. What do they really want? They want the actual story, origin story from that they made.
They wanted that to serve as a basis, basically, or exist.
Can you imagine, like, you're like, do you want to make this really good product placement for the Sega Saturn? No, because they don't do this really bad origin story that no one knows about.
Right, and it's interesting talking about that origin story because, like, in the first one, that whole Jimmy Hedgeman thing is basically stemming from that origin story, treating it as though that is a part of the lore. Whereas in Wonders of the World, the origin story exists almost as like a joke because he's supposed to be giving a school project on Sonic the Hedgehog video games, but he's like blabbering about a World War pilot and like everyone's confused. So I think it was like an in-joke. It's like, well, this is so crazy. Let's pretend it's a kid getting his assignment wrong. So I don't think there was actually a fighter pilot in that universe. It was more like him failing to do a report. So he was like making it up. But like, imagine that, like you're a huge Sonic fan, you have a Sega Saturn at home and you go and stand in front of the class and you're like, oh shit, Sonic was, man, he was like a fighter pilot and
everyone laughs at you. Everyone's like, you're dumb. What are you talking about? Everyone knows he's a blue hedgehog. What do you...
Yeah, and I mean, according to the treatment, which is both on Twitter and on Sonic Retro now, it does like get very specific about the story, but then it's Josh narrating it, and he's in front of his class.
Right.
And so Josh was giving the history of Sonic, but he screwed up and told the wrong story, even though he's a Sonic fan. Like, I can talk about Sonic for 2 hours. I just did it. I don't need, like...
Right.
It's such a weird... It's such a weird way to introduce it, and yet it seems like they were okay with it. I don't know.
It's so weird. I don't know. I think it's so weird to be stuck on that, and then, like, I wonder if they're ever going to bring that origin back again.
I don't know. And it's funny because the closest you can get to like seeing Jimmy Hedgeman is that treatment, which is Sonic the Hedgehog Story Gaiden, which was translated by fans. You can find that online too. But it does show. Here, I'll send you the link real quick. I know we're like wrapping up, but I'll send you the link here. You can see it. It's like someone translated it, and you can see this art that is kind of like what was bouncing around at the time. You see that?
Oh gosh, let me put it on. Okay, yeah, the art with the it's just dumb. Sorry, it's just not very good idea. Like, you don't need it. Can you imagine if Mario came from one of the ultimate plumbers in the 70s and created the best plumbing techniques, but he was killed or something for some reason? I don't know, just too much for kids. Sorry. But yeah.
Yeah, there's a whole bit with like Henry and Chuck, which is like a weird Uncle Chuck reference on the Japan side. I don't understand it. They switch jackets, but then like a teenage girl finds the jacket. Her name is Meg, who's an adult, and Meg and Chuck talk about their old memories of Henry, and Sonic's on the back of the flight jacket. And one day she's like doing coverage of an aviation show, and Sonic comes alive and saves her.
Yeah,
like
so I
think
also
this is why Yuji Naka was arrested. Like, this is
Right.
just like, what is this?
This is the reason.
And Sonic disappeared from the jacket, so he became unlike Sonic jumping out of a TV screen, he jumps off of a jacket. He's a embroidered mascot that comes to life. So, as much crap as I gave that first treatment,
This is better than the actual origin story.
I think they were introduced this and they didn't know much about the games, and they're like, man, this Sonic story is weird. I guess we're supposed to be weird.
Right.
I think they were like, well, we can't have jackets come to life, so let's have a boy transform into the hedgehog that looks like the jacket.
That makes sense. Or maybe they should have made him turn into a jacket.
Well, it's like, how you go to an insane asylum and you're there long enough that like things start to make sense.
Yeah.
That's what I feel like here, because when I look at this story Gaiden and then I look at the treatment, I'm like, oh, that makes sense. It was basically them trying to make the idea of Sonic being a living jacket.
Right.
Make a little more sense. So in their minds, they're like, well, let's have it be a failed science experiment. And he's basically a werewolf.
Right.
And that makes more sense than a jacket coming to life.
A little bit. Just a little bit, though.
What the... Why were they pushing this? That's so weird. In 1993, 1994, 95, like, Sonic was well established in video games, comic books, cartoon shows, and yet they're still pushing the jacket. Like, in Japan, Sonic Team, as great as their games were, their storytelling was in the garbage. Like, what were they thinking?
Like, if they could have fit the jacket storyline into the beginning of Sonic 1, it would have been in there.
It's insane. Anyway, that does it for this bizarre episode of Sega Talk. As I mentioned, you can go to Twitch. The Game Show Game is the account. the streams up there. Also, Will, his streams, they are like a game show, so you can go on there and win Sonic and Sega prizes, and they do chow races. It's very very imaginative. It's very like 90s Nickelodeon. It's very wild. It's actually very well produced too. I was impressed. So all credit goes to him for acquiring this treatment, getting it to a place where we can share it with people. So watch that Cyber Shell read through with David and I and Will, and of course go to Sonic Retro and you can search for it. People are probably bothering me right now, going, "Where's the PDF?" It's there. You just aren't looking for it. So
exactly.
It's not my job to Google for you. Google for me, Barry. Google.
That's why we have AI assistants now. Go ask Gemini.
Yeah. I wonder what ChatGPT could find for them. But next time, I guess I'm doing a double header here. We'll be doing Sega World, so we'll be talking about the failed theme parks. We've done failed movies. Let's do failed theme parks. It's February failure month. Failuary. And then after that, George will be coming back with a video game. So we'll get back into the real games, not talking jackets and Jimmy Hedgeman. So with that, George, anything else you want to say?
Nope, that's it. We'll catch you guys next time on Sega Talk. Bye. Bye.